So we'll welcome the next panel. Apologies for the slight delay. Our seventh session of the day. Moderated, I'll invite all the panelists to come up. The Ethical Recruitment Marketplace and Building Resilience in an Era of Disruption. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for sticking around. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces here today. So without any further ado, I'll introduce this session, and then I really want to turn over to our speakers to really use more of the time to share a little bit about this new initiative from the Consumer Goods Forum that we're calling the Ethical Recruitment Marketplace. So joining me today on the panel, my name's Nawin. I'm a consultant with the Consumer Goods Forum that's been helping to develop and launch this new initiative. And joining us today are two representatives from two of the companies that have been participating in the marketplace. Firstly, Suffiaan from Mondelez, and joining us online is Phoebe from Woolworths Group, as well as Flora Hnederson from Impactt, who we're partnering with to deliver some of the elements of the marketplace program as well, which I'll let her showcase to you at the end of the session, because we really are doing some quite exciting things together. So I'll do a little bit of an introduction to the marketplace program and what it is and the different features of it a bit later. But I actually wanted to start with Phoebe to sort of explain what was the impetus behind this program, how it came to be, and why the Woolworths Group really felt the value of founding and driving this new responsible recruitment initiative. So over to you, Phoebe.
Thank you so much, Nawin, and hi, everyone. So my name is Phoebe Ewen-Pearson, and I'm a senior manager in the Woolworths Group Human Rights team. So Rachel, our general manager of human rights, is the co-chair of the Consumer Goods Forum's Human Rights Coalition. And I myself lead Woolworths Group's responsible sourcing program across our trade supply chain. So I look after thousands of suppliers across Australia, New Zealand, and internationally as well, across the food, non-food, and clothing supply chains. So I myself am based in Hong Kong. I work with a range of suppliers, including in Malaysia. I really wish I was there in person. It's always really special to get together in person for this particular forum. But I've recently returned to work after having a baby. So I really thank you to the organisers for accommodating me to join online. And today, as Nawin said, I would like to take a bit of time to share the Ethical Recruitment Marketplace origin story from our perspective at Woolworths Group. As a company that's committed to advancing human rights, this is a really high priority area of our sustainability strategy. And also as a company, we're really looking to continually seek the horizons of where the key underlying issues like ethical recruitment are going to go next, looking to find initiatives that really allow us to move the dial on some of these shared challenges. So back in 2023, Woolworths Group disclosed our first ever case of modern slavery in our Modern Slavery Statement annual report. This case was a large manufacturer in our Tier 1 own brand supply chain. And looking back, this case had many of the hallmarks of what we now know to be quite a typical recruitment-related case. We saw very, very high recruitment fees being charged to workers that were recruited from overseas. We saw the use of multiple different intermediaries being used to recruit workers from overseas. We saw challenges when it came to access to grievance for those workers. And ultimately, all of these issues compounded into what amounted to be a zero tolerance breach of our responsible sourcing standards, the expectations that we expect our suppliers to meet. So we partnered very, very closely with our supplier, and we embarked on a remediation journey with that supplier, which involved collectively repaying over 700,000 Australian dollars in fees back to workers, and working really closely with that supplier to unpack the root cause and the challenges that had caused this situation in the first place. Through those conversations, we identified a responsibility and need to be very clear in our expectations and to provide greater guidance and support to our suppliers. Recognizing, particularly back then, that responsible recruitment was a relatively new concept being spoken about. It carried a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings of what we were really talking about when we were talking about responsible recruitment and recruitment fees. So off the back of that remediation, we launched the Responsible Recruitment Addendum to our standards, which was a much more detailed document outlining our expectations. And we embarked on a multi-year rollout project in Malaysia and in Thailand to roll out our responsible recruitment requirements. That involved in-country training. I myself personally went out and visited our sites across Thailand and Malaysia. We enhanced our own grievance mechanism with migrant languages. We, of course, continued our socials audit program. But most importantly, we really took the time to listen to our suppliers, to what the industry was saying, to what our peers were saying, and to all of the organizations on the ground who were talking about those underlying challenges. And we identified a number of systemic issues through this process that are absolutely not going to be new to anyone in this room, but of course challenges for our suppliers when it comes to working out who to actually work with to recruit workers. How do I identify the right partner, the right agency? Do I stop working with agencies altogether? Do I directly recruit in country? How do I build trust with migrant workers so they actually tell me if they've paid fees or if they've faced challenges through their recruitment journey, rather than it just coming out in an audit in years' time to come? And also, how do we get the right data and the right systems in place to demonstrate compliance? We found our suppliers were trying to comply with our expectations, our addendum, at the same time as complying with others. Many retailers asking for the same thing, but maybe slightly different. So a lot of challenges on the table. We then moved into some pilot projects. So we piloted, for example, the Fair Hiring Initiatives project to fund some recruitment agencies to go through training to get certified as ethical. We piloted some worker voice programs and a range of partnerships with some incredible organizations across the region. Through that work, the following really became clear. To have a genuine impact beyond ourselves as a company, as Woolworths Group, we identified the need to work with others in a very meaningful way. We really, really need to move away from duplicating each other's work, from reinventing the wheel. There are many companies out there like ours who have been on a similar, if not borderline identical journey to us, who are facing the same challenges as us. And we really recognize that we are greater than the sum of our parts. We also identified that ethical recruitment needs to be a genuinely sustainable business model in order to work. It needs to make commercial sense for companies like ourselves, for our suppliers. It needs to make commercial sense for the recruitment agencies, the intermediaries involved, to actually turn a profit when operating unethically continues to be profitable. So in viewing ethical recruitment through this more economic lens, we feel we're able to have a more powerful conversation with our suppliers, but also with governments, with other actors in our supply chain, moving away from this because we understand it's the right thing to do, but we also really need to move towards the narrative of this is also good business and it's good for business. So the marketplace represents the shared ambition of brands like ourselves to make ethical recruitment the norm in global supply chains. It's built on our member companies' joint efforts to tackle those economic root causes of exploitation and of barriers to ethical recruitment. By working more collaboratively, by pooling resources towards shared interventions, companies like ourselves can achieve far more collectively than through our individual efforts. And through the shared framework of the marketplace, we're seeking to clarify our expectations. We're seeking to reduce the complexity of compliance, the burdens, and of course the costs associated with this, and really actively promote ethical recruitment, reshaping both the supply and demand sides of the migrant worker recruitment journey. So that's all very lofty, and Nawin's going to go into the detail of exactly what that looks like in practice, but I thought I might share the core guiding principles that we've landed on that are really steering this project at the top level. So the first, as I've already outlined, we're really looking to have a market-driven approach here. So creating the economic conditions for ethical recruitment to become a sustainable norm, and moving away from really focusing, as it can be tempting to, on those compliance-based approaches as a company. We're seeking to be inclusive, so convening the largest possible pool of organizations. We want to maximize our collective impact. We are big fans of progress over perfection. We want to be pragmatic. We want to be practical in the solutions that we're developing. We are not seeking to reinvent the wheel. We understand there's amazing work already happening out there. We're looking to leverage and amplify those successful initiatives. We're seeking to be simple, transparent, and innovative. So why is this unique and why is it different? Why and how are we not reinventing the wheel? Ultimately, we really see this as an initiative that's driven by companies like ourselves in partnership and through the CGF. Ultimately, business needs to drive good business practices, and that's really what we're seeking to achieve here. So thank you so much for having me introduce the marketplace. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, and I'll now pass back to Nawin to talk through the marketplace in more detail. Thank you, Nawin.
Thanks very much, Phoebe. I have a couple of slides, if it's all right, to try and get them up on the screen. And if not, we will muddle through. Great. Yes, as Phoebe said, it's all very fine and lofty to talk about some of these things around, driving industry action at scale to collectively address some very deep-seated challenges around ethical recruitment. But what does that actually look like? And so we wanted to spend a little bit of time just to unpack how are we currently approaching the program? What does it look like? What are some of the key interventions that we're currently working on? And what's the horizon for the marketplace? So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Consumer Goods Forum, we are a forum for the world's leading consumer brands to come together to address shared social and environmental challenges in the consumer goods industry. And we work through a number of different coalitions, and the marketplace is a subset of the Human Rights Coalition. And we are a grouping of around 8 brands that together have really decided to come together and, as I said, really drive forward this initiative to utilize the scale of collective action and to really unlock the potential of these brands through our scale, through our shared supply chains, to overcome some of these deep-seated challenges. So what does that look like? Again, I think we all kind of know what are the key challenges around implementing ethical recruitment. And so what, as Phoebe said, makes the marketplace different and unique is we really want to try to overcome some of these challenges by embedding ethical recruitment as a sustainable business model. We cannot compliance our way out of what is fundamentally an economic problem. To borrow a phrase from R.T. Kapoor, we currently have an economic model where, workers pay for jobs instead of companies paying for workers. And in order to invert that fundamental economic dynamic, you need to look at supply and demand. You need to look at market factors, because if the cost of doing business ethically is higher than the cost of doing business unethically, well, water always follows the path of least resistance. So how are we trying to achieve this? So I think one of the key things, as I said, is really trying to unlock what are the barriers that are preventing those sustainable business models from becoming really embedded and normalized in practice. When we look at demand side, we hear about all these brands who have adopted ethical recruitment. They have zero fee policies. They're committed to employer pays, but then when they go out into the supply chain to operationalize it, employers, the suppliers, are saying, well, we don't know who we can work with. There's not enough ethical labor agencies. There's not enough people that can meet our demand for workers. But conversely, if you go to the labor recruiters, and I'm pleased to see that there are some here in this room, they will tell you, we don't have enough business to run an ethical model. That's why a lot of agencies run on a hybrid business model, zero fee for some, traditional recruitment for others, because there's not enough business being driven to actors who are trying to do the right thing. So how do we break down some of these barriers in a smart way to try and build a genuine, sustainable, viable market for ethical recruitment in Asia? So some of the things that we're thinking about, I think, first of all, we need to recognize, again, as some colleagues mentioned this morning, that single point in time interventions are not effective. But I would go further than that and to say single point in the supply chain interventions are not effective either. You cannot just do a capacity building with a labor recruiter, right, and ignore their customers, the workers, the buyers, the brands, governments, because, again, as others have already mentioned, it's the ecosystem that creates the incentives for exploitative recruitment. So unless you are moving all of these levers at the same time, then ultimately single point in time interventions are not going to be effective. So what are some of the things we're looking at? So there's a number of key pillars that we've identified that we want to focus on. Focusing on looking at activities with brands, suppliers / employers / producers, depending on your position in the supply chain, labor providers and workers, as well as governments. The other key thing that we're doing here is it's not our job to do all of these interventions. A lot of what we're doing is trying to see what's already out there, harnessing things that are aligned with our vision, supporting them where we can, harmonizing where we can, reducing duplication, and uniting efforts towards shared goals. And so within this, I just want to briefly touch on a couple of activities that we're looking at. So the first one is something that we're calling the ethical recruitment pathway. So, the idea here is really to recognize that there are a number of certification schemes that are out there. There are a number of labor providers that have gone out to get certified. But that roadmap to sort of transform a labor provider from a traditional to a certified business model is a rocky one. You're asking a labor recruiter to completely overhaul their business model, change their revenue streams, change their practices, with a very uncertain promise of any financial return at the end of it. And so you need to give them a really clearly defined pathway, right? You need to provide structured support, guidance, visibility, and also rewards for participation, right? Unless you really think about the incentives, then you can't really encourage participation. So that's really important for us in this work stream that we're working on. And so this is something that we're currently working on building out. We hope to have the model finalized by the end of the year. Some of you in this room we've already been consulting with as we progress, but that's a really key piece of work for us. The second key thing that I want to talk about also, we've mentioned sort of employer pays, ethical recruitment, but ultimately someone must pay for it, right? And so the other key thing that we are looking at here is how do we equitably share the costs and burdens of implementing ethical recruitment across the supply chain? Ultimately, it is going to need some injection of cost, but also reduction of cost, right? So through looking at responsible purchasing practices and procurement, not just from brands to suppliers / employers, but from employers to labor recruiters. That's really important to actually enable ethical recruitment and, again, to create the market signal to encourage people to come on board with this, right? But also we need to take cost out of the system, reducing complexity, reducing compliance costs, reducing the burden of actually adopting, implementing, and maintaining ethical recruitment is also a really key part of that economic picture that we're trying to address. And then very lastly, we're also talking about, we are not the ones in the room that we need to convince that ethical recruitment is important, right? I am preaching to the converted here, right? What you need is to take it upstairs right, to the people with the decision-making power, to tell people, like, what is the business case for ethical recruitment? Like, why is this important for our business? And so another key piece of work that we're commissioning and we're hoping to start this year is to look at quantifying what is the ROI for ethical recruitment, right? Both in terms of actual return, but also protection of business value, right? So what are you actually getting out of these investments in paying for workers' recruitment costs, supporting training, capacity building, due diligence, monitoring, remediation, all of this investment? Is it providing a positive return for the business? And we know that anecdotally and through other kinds of data that yes, there are definitely positive benefits and returns, but how do we show this in a way that really resonates with business decision makers, right? So that we here can get the buy-in we need from the business to do our jobs. And so that's another key piece of work that we're currently developing, and we're really hoping to be able to showcase that by the end of the year. The last piece of work that we're doing, Flora is going to touch on at the end of this, because this is something that we're really happy to be able to be a minor player in to support Impactt through their work. So I won't touch on that now, but I'll hand over maybe now to Suffiaan to talk a little bit about, as an employer in Malaysia, and who's part of the marketplace, I guess, what do you see as, the reason for joining, and what do you see as the benefits for you for participating in a program of this nature?
Thank you, Nawin. So my name is Suffiaan. I'm the Sustainability Lead for Southeast Asia Business Unit for Mondelez International. Maybe quickly introduce my company for those of you maybe have not heard of it. So we are one of a global snacking company based out of US. We produce, we are brand owners for chocolate, iconic brands like Cadbury, Toblerone, Milka, biscuits like Oreo, meals like Kraft, Philadelphia cheese, and so forth. So we are a consumer goods company, and we do supply to Woolworths, for example, in Australia. So when your customer is looking at certain ways to address certain problems, you do listen to them. Just like for us, Woolworths or other retailers, when they're concerned about certain issues, we as a supplier must really listen to it and must understand what the concerns are. At the same time, when we talk to our suppliers, you also should listen as well, right? So the issue, what we've been facing when it comes to a global supply chain like us, first I want to talk about how we strategize our human rights due diligence. So number one is on the own operations. So we've got manufacturing plants across the globe. We do have deep understanding. We conduct SMETA audit, whether it's enough or not, but we do that every 3 years. So our manufacturing plants across the globe must conduct at least SMETA audit every 3 years. Some of them has to conduct once a year, depending on some of the license holders that we have. And of course, within that operation itself, you need to have certain requirements, right? So in terms of, what kind of the questions that you need to ask to your labor providers, to your contractors. That is something that we have improved on over the years. The second part is on the tier 1 or strategic suppliers. So we do have thousands of suppliers, but in the past 2 years, we've worked with almost 1,200 suppliers. So we expect as well that they also conduct SMETA audit. And we've been able to cover almost 1,200 plus. And within those 1,200 suppliers, we have about 100 strategic suppliers that we also conduct capability building through partnership in, for example, In Progress, through CGF and so forth. But also the third one is on critical upstream supply chain. So for Mondelez, agri-commodities is very important to us. So without cocoa, we cannot make those chocolates. Without dairy, we cannot make those cheese as well as our dairy milk. And also without hazelnuts, we cannot do inclusion for our brands as well. And of course, in this part of the world, palm oil and sugarcane is also very important. So when we look at risk assessment of our biggest risk, but also biggest emission as well, it comes from these commodities, this cocoa, palm oil, dairy, and sugarcane, and so forth. So that's where we have to also work through the roundtables, through industry coalition to address some of these concerns within these commodities or corridors. Now, when we have 1,200, these are only tier one suppliers. I think we might have maybe 10,000 suppliers indirect as well. Whatever that we do right now is not enough. We just are not able to go through everyone, and that's the case for even our peer companies who's also seated here as well. And also it has to be something of what we call as corridor agnostic or what we call it economic agnostic in terms of it cannot just be for palm oil or for sugar or for cocoa. It has to be agnostic in that sense. And that's why we look at ethical marketplace as something that is very innovative. It's very genuine. I mean, I've been in those working groups with a few of my peers. I think we look forward for more contribution as well from other sectors and also supply chain players. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about our brands, our products, it's all about the value chain, the supply chain that moves the products, but it's the people that moves the products. And what we see is that, yes, of course, for companies like us, we do have this commitment on zero, for example, recruitment fees. But if we just only a handful of companies do that, you still cannot move the needle on unethical recruitment practice. So Nawin has shared as well, Phoebe as well, that you have a hybrid model of recruiters that have, okay, if you want an ethical supply chain, a labor supply chain, we can do that for you, but we also need to have those, the status quo, right? So we do need that scale. And therefore, I think what Ethical Recruitment Marketplace can provide to us, and also I think that I call on all of you to also look into this, and we are more than happy to have more Q&As on this, is that we do believe that it can be actionable. It is actionable in a way that now it's not about capability building, right? So we've worked on that one. But next question is about where can we find, labor ethical recruitment providers, for example. What kind of trainings can we get? Is certification enough, or can we harmonize between different certification? So we allow any suppliers, not just tier one, tier two, everyone to come in and provide that to understand where they can work on. I think Nawin talked about the maturity pathway. So we do believe that we need to what we call incentivize the progress versus just audit itself. Number two is, of course, it's applicable. So it's not agnostic. It's agnostic against any corridor or commodities. So that's a great thing. And the third one is scalable, because like what I shared just now, as a company, even though we can do our part with our tier one suppliers, we just cannot go beyond that. It's just cost-wise is one thing, but I don't want to talk about cost, but it's more complex than that. Yeah, so I think if I sum it up, it is a great opportunity for us. I think this is after a decade of working in the FMCG space on responsible sourcing. I feel that is something that is concrete that we are trying to build here. So that's why. Thank you.
Sorry, running out of battery, as some of you may be as well out in the audience. But I think we have about 10 minutes left. So I do want to allow a little bit of time for Q&A if I can. But I want to hand over now to Flora to talk about one of Impact's really exciting initiatives around recruitment fee transparency that we were really excited to be able to partner with in a very small way through the marketplace. So over to you, Flora, to give us a walkthrough of Atlas. And I believe that you may have some slides. Great.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, it's really great to be here virtually to speak to you all. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. And thank you so much to the CGF and the marketplace, who we've been working with, as Nawin mentioned, for a while now on this really exciting project that we're working on. So can I just confirm that the slides are up? Great, thank you so much. So just to give a very brief introduction to who Impactt is, maybe we can go to the next slide. So Impactt is a business and human rights ethical consultancy, and we specialise in helping businesses understand the human rights impacts of their operations and supply chains, And just to mention on ethical recruitment, we have supported the investigation and repayment of over 130 million US dollars across 212 companies. So we do have an understanding of what this really means in reality to ensure ethical recruitment. And we've also written some principles and guidelines on the repayment of recruitment fees, which would also be an interesting resource to have a look at for those who have not come across it yet. So we're here today to talk a bit about a project that we've been working on with the CGF and others. If we can go to the next slide, thank you. So we're all aware that recruitment fees are a problem, obviously. However, evidence for the payment of recruitment fees is lacking. We found that we only have evidence of recruitment fee payment in around 5% of cases. So this makes it really difficult to see the underlying data that kind of evidences this is taking place. So we've been working on a project to basically democratize this data and make it freely accessible for people to see. So we've created what we're calling the Ethical Recruitment Atlas, which is a freely accessible, credible database showing what the recruitment fee paid by migrant workers are across different recruitment corridors. And we're doing this by getting a very large pool of data that workers have paid for recruitment, and then making this visible without any paywalls. So essentially what we've done is worked with many different companies and organizations to gather data on what recruitment fee payments are, so the actual amounts of fees and related costs that have been paid. And we're gathering this through different data sources, so for example, through PDFs, private databases. And then we've been working with an AI company to create an AI model to analyze the data. And we are then manually checking to make sure that that data is valid and credible. And then we have brought this all together to create a map which shows the amount of recruitment fees that have been paid by workers across different corridors. And this is all based on worker testimonies. So it really supports that data and that evidence base to show that this is happening in reality. So we're currently in the process of building this whole database, and we're very pleased to say that it will be launching in July. But I wanted to give here just a quick sneak peek of what this actually looks like in reality to make you aware of it as a tool. So maybe if we go to the next slide. So this is what it looks like. I've just taken some screenshots of what this database will be. But essentially, so far we have gathered or processed 6,700 different pieces of worker testimony of workers who have said that they have paid recruitment fees. And this covers 193 different recruitment corridors from different origin countries and different destination countries. And we found that the average recruitment fees that have been paid by workers across all these different corridors is $1,600 US dollars. So this is what the atlas looks like at the start. And then if we go to the next slide, we can see what it looks like when we go in. So once you're into the atlas, you can choose your migration corridor to see the amounts of recruitment fees that have been paid. So you can choose your destination country, your origin country, and then also the sector which, that worker was working for. So if we go to the next slide, I'm just showing that there you can see your origin country just as an example. And then the next slide, I think, will show some of the sectors where people are working. So this will really help companies to be able to choose the corridor and the sectors that are most relevant to them to find that evidence base. So if we go to the next slide, this is just an example that I've taken of what would look like to choose one recruitment corridor. So here we have asked to see workers that are traveling to Malaysia and have paid fees. So on the left-hand side, you can see the different origin countries that the workers have come from. You can also see the breakdown of the different industry and sectors. We also have included worker testimonies in quotes. And this is really important to really make this real. I think sometimes it can seem quite offhand and not bring this into reality. So we wanted to bring out that worker voice, which is a really important part of the project. I think, if we go to the next slide. I just wanted to mention here that the values that we're using for the recruitment fees that have been paid have been adjusted for inflation. just showing that these values are kind of relevant and material now, because we are collecting data from a large data range of times. If we go to the next slide, thanks. So quickly, who can use this resource? We think it will be useful for buyers to be able to kind of strengthen the business case for why they should be looking at this issue. It's important for suppliers to be able to, as you know, Phoebe, Nawin, and others have been mentioning, the fact that this needs kind of a cross industry approach. It's not specific to one supplier, but just to be able to kind of build that collaborative nature to address this problem. We think it will be useful for government to be able to use this evidence base when it comes to policy making, and then also for auditors to be able to expect what kind of recruitment fees they should be looking for, because quite often this is hidden or not disclosed. So if we go to the next slide. I just wanted to mention briefly at the end who we've been working with. So we have some strategic partners. So for example, we've been working with the Global Data Partnership on Forced Labour, which is part of the World Economic Forum. But we also have a series of funding partners, of which the CGF is one, who have really enabled us to get to this stage. This project has been going on for several years at this point. So we're really kind of grateful for this support. And then finally, we have been working with a range of data contributors. So the idea is that we need to be building and gathering this data and continually updating it to make sure that the recruitment fees that we can see are relevant and most up to date. So far, we have actually 17,000 pieces of worker testimony, but we have only been able to analyse 6,700 of them with our current funding, which has been able to get us to the launch stage. But we're always looking for more data contributors, more funding, so that we can really be able to analyse all the data that we have to make this the most useful resource for people to use. So that was a very quick overview, but also very happy to answer any questions on this. Thanks. I'll hand over to Nawin.
They're all dying on me. Thanks very much, Flora. I really appreciate that. And I think one of the reasons we're really excited to partner with Atlas and Impactt is because I think it really aligns with everything we've been talking about, of the ethos of the marketplace, right? Harnessing the scale of collective action, being open, being transparent, sharing all of that data that we're all individually sitting on, but individually we can't actually leverage to drive impact. And also to be able to think about how we can use this data to actually take costs out of the system, right? Because recruitment fee investigations are expensive, right? Like, you know, as some people talked about earlier, how do you kind of support fee repayments when you don't have evidence, as most fee payments aren't evidenced? Well, this provides the evidence base. It provides the backstop, and so it helps to really, hopefully, we hope to be able to kind of unlock more progress and really open up the conversation about who's paying what for jobs in the supply chain. So I think we have about 5 minutes left. I don't know if we've received any questions online, but happy to take a few with the time that we've got left.
Yes, thank you. We received a couple, and as you mentioned, though we have a couple of minutes, let's see how far we go. The first one reads, how are you incorporating learnings from the recruitment industry from the last 10 years in the marketplace? The second one actually is very specific and is directed at one of our online speakers, which reads, can Impactt enlighten us and let us know with ethical recruitment experience practices when dealing directly with global manufacturing companies in Malaysia? What are your reflections with your work on this topic?
Great, thank you. I might actually turn to Phoebe to talk about reflections of the recruitment industry, because I think some of the work that you actually did with labor providers also was a kind of key informative point behind why you started the marketplace.
Yeah, sure. I think if I kind of go back to that 2022 case that I mentioned when I was speaking, I think the initial kind of knee-jerk reaction, at least back then, hopefully not so much anymore, when it came to uncovering recruitment-related issues, was to kind of jump very quickly to assuming fault at the agency level, or assuming you know, bad actors at that level of the recruitment journey. Now, of course, there are challenges there, but certainly something that we've learned, at least through our work with actually partnering both with our suppliers, but also having quite frank discussions with recruitment agencies through some of those pilot projects that I mentioned, is that the agencies themselves face a lot of challenges. And it's incredibly challenging to differentiate and succeed as a truly ethical recruiter, be it recruitment agency or any other kind of intermediary in this space. And that's really one of the main challenges that we're looking to tackle here through the marketplace, in trying to prove, but also really drive the fact that ethical recruitment can be a profitable business endeavor, both for ourselves, for our suppliers, but also for agencies involved. It's not an easy journey, but it's definitely one of the things that we're really, really looking to drive forward through this project. So certainly we've been listening to recruitment agencies. Those conversations are one of the driving forces as to how the marketplace actually came into being in the first place. And we'll continue to have those conversations as we continue with the marketplace, for sure.
Thanks, Phoebe. And then Flora, maybe quickly in 30 seconds, if you wanted to address the comment directed at Impactt.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, very quickly, the main things that we see in Malaysia, I think, is probably things that we've already been covering already. I think one key thing to mention here is just the complexity of the supply chain and the use of sub-agents. Not having that holistic view does create additional risk, not only in Malaysia, but I think generally that's one of the kind of key issues that we find with responsible recruitment. It's really working with all the different actors in that supply chain.
Thanks very much, Flora. So then I think it just remains for me to thank all of our panelists for joining us today, as well as a very big thank you to the IHRB for inviting us to share a little bit about the marketplace with you all today. And I think now it might be coffee break time, which is great for everyone. So thank you.
Exactly. Thank you so much. And as Nawin already mentioned, we're going on a coffee break. So let's wake up after that beautiful lunch. And I'll see you back tomorrow at 4 for our next session hosted by Amazon and IOM.